Okay, this is chapter 4, part 1. This chapter gets into the second stage in this pathway or trajectory that the author is outlining about how someone develops into a mass killer. So let's jump in here. Remember that first step is sort of the collection of grievances. We covered that in the last chapter. Now let's get into the second step, is this pathway to ideation and foreshadowing. What do we mean by those? We'll get to that in just a second. After developing deep grievances against others, which we talked about in the previous chapter, the killers develop the idea that payback through violence is the correct response. See, so that's you could have somebody who develops grievances and sees a lot of grievances, collects grievances. Someone who's prone to develop these grievances. But they might be someone who doesn't believe in violence, who believes that violence is wrong, is immoral, is evil, and that's not the appropriate, it's not an okay response. And so they may have a lot of grievances, but they may try to deal with them differently than using violence. So you have to be pro-violent in this next step. You have to see violence as an acceptable solution, as an acceptable response to these grievances. And so there has to be some pro-violence attitudes there for you to be moving forward in these stages towards actual committing violence. Okay? So you got to, the part of it, and I don't think she stresses it maybe enough, is this idea that you have to see violence as acceptable, as okay, and an acceptable form of payback, of revenge, of justice as you see it. That violence is an acceptable form of justice. You're going to need to think that to feel okay about going ahead with committing violence. He chooses a target and begins to fantasize about the violence. We talked about rumination before. You're sitting around and thinking about things a lot. That's the getting angry part, the resentment part, the negative emotions. But another part of the sitting around and ruminating, thinking about it a lot, is imagining that you're committing violence, imagining you're doing these things, to kind of walk through how you would do it and what it would be like. So again, it's all in your head. But that's one thing we learned from psychology, that one of the sort of functions, why is it that we fantasize like we do, or we think about things even though it's not real, it's just in our heads? One of the reasons why we do that is that it's a way that helps us plan actions. If I was going to do this, how would I do it? So you walk through the steps. So it's sort of helps you plan, even if you're not actively planning. You're imagining how it could be done, even if hypothetically. And so there's sort of this planning function to it. And also if the sort of learning to sort of enjoy the thought of it. So there's that part of it too. The target can range from specific individuals to totally symbolic victims who are not specific people. They simply belong to the target group. That's one. I think this spectrum is important to realize about these mass killers, is that I think the more typical type, which you're not focused on much in this textbook, the more typical type is, I would say, a good example of that would be some guy who collects grievances at work, is mad at everybody at work, is mad at his boss, is mad at fellow coworkers, who gets in trouble a lot, gets fired, loses his job, and so he goes home and plans a crime and brings a gun to work and shoots up the place. And he's shooting basically people who specific people he has a beef with. And so that's where it's based more on the individuals that you have a problem with. By the way, that's the way common violence is. Common violence is usually, I have a beef with you, not with your group, not with some abstract person. I have a problem with you because of the way you've interacted with me. That's the way common violence is most of the time. It's not symbolic. I'm beating up on you because you belong to a abstract class of people. Usually it's a personal beef. So that's the most common sort of violence. The high profile cases, the ones that get the most media attention, maybe because they're a little bit unusual and are so therefore more exciting and sensationalistic, are those who these ideological crimes where they don't know the victims at all, complete strangers, but those victims symbolize a group that the killer thinks deserves punishment, deserves retaliation. So it could be some of these more ideological crimes that the author quite often focuses on. Ideological crimes, the sort of racially or religiously bias motivated crimes, that sort of thing, right? Those type of crimes certainly occur, but again, they're not as common as the more common forms of violence. This is called the ideation phase. So ideation means thoughts, right? It's the thinking phase. You're thinking it through, you're fantasizing, you're ruminating, you're sitting around developing not only the grievances, but then getting into, okay, I think violence is a possibility here. What would that be like if I was to commit violence? And so you're sitting and fantasizing about it. It's all at the idea in your head level. Now, this other term that she puts out there, a good term, foreshadowing, also can be called leakage, which refers to words and behavior by the killer that hint at his intentions to commit a crime. These people tend to be quiet, but they're so obsessed with their violence, they're so obsessed with their plans, their fantasies, their grievances, that it will leak out to other people. There's several, of course, common ways that happens. It's likely to be leaked to schoolmates, if we're talking about a school shooting here. Just people who you're having a chat with. It comes out in your casual conversation. So it could be peers or friends at school. It could be family members. It could be parents. It could be teachers. It's kind of like who do you talk with comfortably? Because it's going to leak out when you're comfortable. Maybe it's not going to be your parents, because most kids are not real comfortable talking, loosely with parents. And so probably, could be parents, but more likely not. As who would they talk around casually, loosely with, and not be guarded, not be careful about what they're saying. You're going to see a lot of that online, because online, social media, online sorts of postings, etc., that facilitates this leakage. This foreshadowing, because it's a comfortable place. It could be anonymous, and an anonymous sort of setting, it's easy to just kind of pour out your thoughts and to share people you don't know. It's like that tends to be a place that the social media online context encourages people to say things they wouldn't normally say. They say more extreme things. They confess things that they wouldn't say to somebody face to face necessarily. So social media online presence, those contexts are very good place to pick up this foreshadowing, to see what people are thinking and maybe planning. The violent fantasies become increasingly detailed. Some killers will study famous other killers, killings that have already occurred. Again, the students, the studiers, the researchers, which we will talk about down the road here more, that's, again, a little bit unusual. Most of these guys are not scholars. They're not, big, huge book readers necessarily, and researchers. It's going to tend to be your more intelligent guys, your more curious guys, the guys who are maybe antisocial and enjoy on their own reading stuff because they're loners and they're entertained by reading stuff, studying stuff. They sometimes have these kind of, loner, but curious, but like to learn stuff. Sometimes can be quite intelligent. But again, that's a subtype of killer. Most killers are not scholars, are not big readers. So let's keep a little bit of balance and context here. But with these guys who do study other serial killers, that you can get a lot of ideas. You can get templates, meaning plans. You can get inspiration. You can get justifications. You can read what other people have to say about why they're doing what they're doing and why they think so you can get a lot of bad, evil messages out there, especially, I'm speaking mostly online type of researching, there's all sorts of bad stuff out there if you're looking for it that can encourage this type of thinking, this type of planning, justifications for these sorts of crimes, etc. One important item to note is that not all people go past a particular phase. Very important here. Some people will develop a grievance, but never seriously fantasize about violence, maybe because they disapprove of it. They think I'm not going to go there. I'm going to get caught. I'll go to prison. I'll get killed myself. It's wrong. It's immoral. Violence is not the way to go. So they may be very angry, but they may not think that violence is the solution. But if someone thinks that violence is a solution, then they'll move to that next stage, that next phase, where they'll be fantasizing, contemplating, and perhaps planning crimes. Some will fantasize but not go any further. So some people are big thinkers and, like to sit around and fantasize it, but actually doing it is a different thing. And so some people will stop short of going to the actual action of committing the crime. And they so think of it as a stage that people can progress along, but people will stop. Most people will stop before they go all the way to the ultimate end where they're committing the crime. The internet, of course, has facilitated killers learning and copying from each other. Like-minded individuals, otherwise isolated, can communicate and encourage each other. See, that's one thing. These individuals are rare. These killers are rare. We focus on a lot on them in this course, and even in other courses in the media, in the movies, etc. But the fact is that these people are not common people. They're unusual, quite rare people. So how do they find each other to encourage each other when they're rare? Well, online, that's one thing that's bad about the internet, is that you can get an isolated person over there who's troubled, who can communicate with an isolated person over some other place who's troubled, and you get them together and they make each other worse. Or you get a whole group of them that make individuals making each other worse. So we're able to take troubled people, put them together, and they can exacerbate each other's problems. They can make each other's problems worse, and encourage each other. So there's that social kind of dynamic here, which is a problem, and it's generally speaking an internet thing. Of course, occasionally you get somebody like the Columbine killers who were fellow students and friends. It's not like they met online or something like that. So occasionally you can get troubled people who will end up being friends physically, that they're friends in the regular way, face to face. So that can happen, but again, it's not super common because these rare people have to find each other. Okay, so these guys come to see themselves as righteous killers, dispensing street justice on victims. So don't think that these guys are feeling guilty or really troubled or torn inside, something like that. They think that they're righteous. They think that who are the evil ones? The people they want to go hurt are the evil ones. They just want to punish them with justice, with payback. They're the ones who've done bad things to me, and if I just let them walk, if I let them get away with it, then justice is not served. The only way that justice is served is if they get punished for what they've done to me. So they think of it as their crimes as a righteous endeavor, a good thing, not a bad thing. We see it as how it is, which is an evil act, but their perception is completely different. Of course, social media also can facilitate law enforcement tracking threats. That I should stress a lot. I don't think the author does, at least at this point in the book, very much. That's a good thing about social media, is that it's something that can be easily tracked by law enforcement if they have the will, the personnel, they prioritize this sort of stuff. You can easily track this stuff online because it's done in a social context. It's not hidden or not hidden well. And it's evidence that's hard evidence because it's written. It's, you can gather that objective hard evidence that's very convincing in a legal setting too. So, again, so much with the internet is like bad in some ways and good in some ways. People foreshadowing future behavior can make intervention possible if people report the talk to others. This is one thing that you see among researchers trying to figure out how to reduce mass killings, which is hard to do. I'll say right up front, it's hard to stop, to prevent, to reduce these killings. Hard thing to do. But one promising lead, according to the researchers, is that these guys do foreshadow. They leak, they talk. But the question is, does anybody in authority find out about the leakage, the words, the threats, what these people plan on doing? We've got to develop better communication between say, for example, the students that hear the kid's plans to shoot up the school. Does that knowledge the kids have, does it make it to the teachers? Does it make it to the principal, to the administrators? And then do the administrators act on it, type of thing. So we need to have better communication sort of practices, so that this leakage makes it to the right people who can do something about it. So that's one way we can potentially prevent some of these horrible crimes. Let's stop there. We'll stop there and we'll continue on in part 2.